Manchester United have a problem. Man United have a big problem. And it's actually more of a problem than it seems because it isn't as big of a problem as it appears. When Solskjaer took over from Mourinho, initially as an interim manager, there was a lot of optimism about the fact that United, the old United, were back and they were going to go to new great heights once Solskjaer was given money and given signings and given time. But I think over the time that Solskjaer's been around, he's set an annoying, at least for United fans, cycle, a very predictable cycle whereby he gets the fans' hopes up and United really look like a very good team, a very promising team. And they'll go on a good run, beat a couple of big teams, play some really fluid, good-looking football. And then it just sort of all comes crashing back to reality. And then they're now drawing against small teams, losing against small teams. And, the same old criticisms start coming up. Luke Shaw isn't good enough. Why don't United have a winger? How come Fred is still starting? How come they paid all this money for Maguire and he doesn't perform like an £80 million defender or player would be expected to? And quite frankly, I think it's just indicative of the fact that Solskjaer is an average manager. And the thing with average managers is they just simply won't improve their team much more than they're expected to. And likewise, they will not make a team regress more than they're expected to. So you'll see that United, as long as they do not have incredible players, which they haven't for maybe, you could say, 3 or 4 years before Sir Alex Ferguson retired, as long as they don't have a world-class 11 and the subs bench to go with it, they're not going to do much more than you'd expect a team of their quality to do, especially with a manager like Solskjaer in charge. The real issue with this is that because Solskjaer is a club legend and because you could technically say he hasn't done that bad during his time at United, when he does go on those runs of good form and United look like a very impressive team, it makes it very difficult to support sacking him because you run into the issue of who can you replace him with. That's one. Two, would it be a good look rather for a club of United's stature to sack a club legend? And thirdly, why not give him a little bit more time, considering he's gone on these amazing runs and the team has showed promise in the past? And if we just give him this player, or if we just let him sign these key players, the team could be finally ready to challenge for the Premier League or the Champions League. The problem with that line of thinking, especially the idea that a certain key number of players are just gonna sort everything out for United, is that to begin with, Solskjaer, regardless of how great he was as a player and how decent, you could say, he's been as a manager, he just doesn't have the pulling power to attract players that would genuinely improve United. Besides Bruno Fernandes, who I think has been a great signing, I'd say that none of United's signings have been the sort of signings that a team that expects to win the Premier League this year would make. And even though it's easy to just blame the board and Woodward and say that they don't want to back the manager, you can only back the manager so much if players do not want to come and play under that manager. There's nothing that United can do or the United board can do if a player of Van Dijk or Nicolas Zule, if a player of that caliber does not want to play at United. You could throw as much money at the club as you want, but you can't make the player sign because the player still has to decide whether that team's ambitions are in line with theirs, and is the manager going to improve my game and what are my prospects upon signing for this team. And at the moment, the fact that United have been pigeonholed for the last few years into making signings that aren't completely game changing or team changing. And the fact that the manager in charge, Solskjaer, isn't exactly the biggest name in football, it just means that you're going to get more and more signings that have the potential to do well. That could be, the answer to all of United's problems, but the less that you're bargaining from a more advantageous big club position, like Liverpool have only recently now been able to do, as Man City have been able to do for the past 10 years, as Chelsea have been able to do for the past 15 years, the more difficult it is to build a proper world-class team. I think United are going to have to cut their losses and just bite the bullet on Solskjaer by the end of the season, because the more time they wait, managers like Allegri, Pochettino, even Nagelsmann, who might become free at some point in the future, they're going to pass them by, because no one, especially the managers I've mentioned, is going to want to go to a club that requires an ever-increasing rebuilding job.